You're safe here tonight.
You don't even know who I am.
I know you're hungry.
That's enough.
Stay away from my daughter.
Only Nadia decides whether I leave.
You have nothing worthy of her. He had nothing. I chose him anyway.
I run operations for Weston Group.
That man is my chairman.
The man you chose before the money.
He sat on the cold concrete outside Drake Tower with a cardboard sign and a paper coffee cup. The city moved around him in every direction, suits, heels, earbuds in, eyes forward. Some people turned away when they caught his gaze. Some filmed him with their phones. In 30 days, only 92 people had stopped out of the tens of thousands who passed. He wasn't done yet. Then she stopped, not with pity, not with performance, but with something in her eyes that made him forget, for just a moment, that any of this was supposed to be a test. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. She didn't know she was kneeling beside the most dangerous secret in the world. His name was Caleb Weston, and he had been sitting on this particular stretch of sidewalk for most of the afternoon. It was day 28. He had 2 days left before Robert Cross would drive up in the company car and hand him his real phone and his real life back. The city had been telling him what it thought of people like the person he was pretending to be, and so far the answer was, not much. The woman crouched down in front of him without asking permission. She was wearing a dark coat over work clothes, a bag on her shoulder, a reusable cup in one hand. She set the cup down on the concrete beside her. She looked at him the way people look at someone they are actually seeing, not evaluating, not flinching, just looking. "Did you eat today?" she asked. He blinked. Most people, even the kind ones, didn't start with a direct question. They dropped something in the cup, said God bless, and moved on. This woman waited for an answer. Some, he said. She studied him for a moment. Something in her expression shifted, not to pity, but to a kind of quiet decision. "Come on," she said. "I live 2 blocks from here. I'll make you something real." He had protocols for this. The experiment had rules. He was supposed to observe, catalog, and move on. He was not supposed to accept extended assistance, because it compromised the data. He had maintained these protocols for 28 days through heat, rain, and one memorable thunderstorm that had lasted 8 hours. He heard himself say, "Okay." She lived on the 6th floor of a building that smelled like old wood and someone's cooking. She did not apologize for the size of the apartment, which was not large. She went straight to the kitchen and started pulling things from the refrigerator. He stood in the doorway of the living room and watched her. The apartment was clean, not carefully staged for guests, clean, just the ordinary tidiness of someone who lived in a space they respected. There were books on the shelf, a half-finished work document on the laptop on the coffee table, and a framed photograph on the wall of 2 women and an older man at what looked like a college graduation. He did not ask about it. "Sit down," she said from the kitchen. "You're not a stranger. You're a person," he sat. She made pasta from scratch, which he had not expected, working quickly and without commentary. She asked him his name. He said Cal. She said her name was Nadia. She asked how long he'd been on the street. He gave the answer he'd been giving for 28 days, long enough to know the city's rhythms, vague enough to deflect follow-up questions. She didn't push. She set a plate in front of him and sat down across the table and ate her own food. They talked for over an hour. Not about his circumstances. She seemed to understand instinctively that he was not in the mood to explain himself, and she didn't require explanation as the price of company. She talked about her work, a non-profit focused on workforce reentry programs. She talked about the difference between policy changes that look good in grant application and changes that actually moved people's lives. She had strong opinions about both. She talked about the photograph on the wall, her father, gone 4 years now, and her mother and sister, who were both, in her words, a lot. He watched her hands when she talked. She had a habit of holding her coffee cup with both palms when she was making a point she found obvious. He noticed it twice, then made himself stop noticing it. After dinner, she found him a towel and showed him the bathroom. She said she'd be back in the morning with clothing. He started to say she didn't have to. She looked at him with something he could only describe as patience, the look of someone who had already made a decision and didn't need to re-examine it. "I know I don't have to," she said. "That's not the point." He stood in the bathroom after she'd gone to bed and looked at his own reflection for a long time. He had a second phone, encrypted, not the prop device he carried as Cal, in the lining of his jacket. He hadn't turned it on in 5 days. He turned it on now. 12 missed calls from Robert Cross. One text, sent 2 hours ago. "The annual summit starts in 48 hours. The industry is waiting." Caleb looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Push the Chicago debrief. I need 2 more days." He didn't wait for a reply. He put the phone back in his jacket, turned off the bathroom light, and went to the couch she'd made up for him with a folded blanket and a pillow she'd retrieved from the closet without being asked. He lay there in the dark, listening to the city outside the window. He had 92 data points. He had analyzed every variable. He had the name of every person who had stopped and every person who had walked past. He had not planned for this. He woke before she did. The apartment was quiet in the way of early mornings, street sounds a floor below, the hiss of a radiator somewhere. Caleb sat up on the couch and spent a few minutes recalibrating. The blanket was good quality. The pillow had a slight scent of laundry detergent, the cheap kind people buy when they don't have discretionary income and spend it anyway on something that smells clean. He had stopped noticing that kind of detail in his own life years ago. He was noticing it now. There was a note on the kitchen counter, folded in half with a coffee cup sitting on top of it like a paperweight. "Coffee's in the pot. Help yourself." Back by 9:30, and he read it twice. Then he poured himself a cup and stood at the window and watched the street for a while. When she came back, she was carrying a paper bag from a thrift store 3 blocks north and a small coffee for herself. She set the bag on the table and started pulling things out without ceremony. 2 shirts, a pair of dark trousers, a belt, a jacket that had some wear but held its shape. "I guessed the size," she said. "You can exchange them if anything doesn't fit." He picked up one of the shirts and checked the tag. She had guessed correctly. "How did you know?" he asked. She shrugged. "I pay attention." She sat down at the kitchen table with her coffee. My father was the same build. He changed in the bathroom and came back out, and she looked at him with the particular expressionlessness of someone trying not to react. He wasn't sure what she was trying not to react to. He let it go. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table again, which seemed to be how they naturally organized themselves in this small space, and she opened her laptop and started working. He did not feel like an intrusion. She did not treat him like one. After 20 minutes, she looked up and said, "There's bread if you want toast. The toaster is one of those ones that only works if you push the lever down twice. I keep meaning to replace it." He made toast. He pushed the lever down twice. He brought a slice to her without asking. She looked at it, then at him. "Thank you," she said. It was a small thing. He couldn't explain why it sat strangely in his chest. Around 11, her phone rang. She answered and turned slightly toward the window, not fully away from him. Just a half turn that said, "This private, but I'm not hiding it." He heard a woman's voice, energetic and a little loud. Nadia's responses were brief. "Yes, I know, I'll explain later." She hung up and turned back. "My coworker," she said. "She's a warrior." "You told her about me," he said. Nadia looked at him steadily. "I told her I had a guest." He nodded. "Is that a problem?" she asked. "No," he said. "I'm just not used to being mentioned." She considered that. "You don't seem like someone who's been doing this long," she said. The street. "You hold yourself differently." He had been waiting for this line of questioning since last night. He had a cover answer ready. "I had a business," he said. "It didn't survive." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," she said. Not the reflexive sorry of social obligation. The kind that meant that must have been hard to live through. The kind you only said when you'd thought about what the person in front of you actually felt. "It was a while ago," he said. "Things that happen a while ago don't always feel a while ago," she said. He looked at her. "What?" she said. "Nothing. You're right." She opened her laptop again. He looked around the apartment and noticed, for the first time, a book on the far shelf with a worn spine and a handwritten label on the inside cover. He could see the label from here. The handwriting was a woman's, older, careful. He didn't know why he looked at it. He looked away. An hour later, she closed the laptop. She said, "I want to ask you something, and you don't have to answer." "Okay," he said. "Do you have anywhere to go? After this, I mean." He thought about the penthouse on the 42nd floor, the driver waiting on call, the summit. Robert Cross's 12 missed calls. Eventually, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she opened the drawer of the kitchen table and took out an envelope and set it on the surface between them. He looked at it. $4,200, she said. "It's my emergency fund. I want you to take it, Nadia, before you say anything." She kept her hand on the envelope but didn't push it toward him. "I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I'm doing this because I believe in people being able to rebuild, and I have the means right now, and you're sitting in front of me." She paused. I know what it's like to need something and have people look past you like you're not there. I don't want to be that person." He looked at the envelope. $4,200. For her, that was not a token. That was months of careful saving. She had handed it over without a receipt, without collateral, without terms. "It's too much," he said. "It's what I have that I can give," she said. He sat there with the particular discomfort of someone who is receiving something real when they are used to receiving performance. He knew exactly how much money was in the accounts under his name. He also knew that none of it had ever felt like this. He took the envelope. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once and stood up to start making lunch. He sat at the table with the envelope in his lap and looked at the city outside the window and thought about what it meant to give something freely. Later, after she'd gone to the kitchen, he took out the encrypted phone and typed a message to Robert Cross. "Prepare a property transfer. Lincoln Park Building, the one under the LLC. Put it in her name, Nadia Osei. I'll send you the spelling." He paused. "Also, find the best ring in the city. Don't overdo it, something real." Robert's reply came back in under a minute. "Understood. And the summit?" Caleb looked at the kitchen doorway. He could hear Nadia humming something under her breath while she cooked. "I'll handle it," he typed. "Just do the transfer." He put the phone away. That night, Nadia said something that undid 30 days of clean data. They were eating again at the kitchen table. She'd made a soup from things she already had in the pantry, which meant she'd spent nothing extra on him. Which he noticed when she set down her spoon and looked at him with the particular attention she gave to things she was about to say carefully. "I've been trying to figure out where I know you from," she said. He kept his face neutral. "You mentioned that yesterday. I think it was a fundraiser," she said, 3 years ago. "There was a panel discussion about economic mobility. One of the speakers had your face. He was wearing a different kind of suit." "Different kind," he repeated. "Different kind," he repeated. "The kind you don't think about." She said it simply, not cruelly. You just wear it. People who grew up with money wear things a certain way. Not loud, just settled. She tilted her head. "That was you, wasn't it?" He held the question in the air between them. He could deflect again. He had been deflecting for 28 days. He was good at it. "I went to a lot of things like that," he said. Which was true. She accepted it. She picked up her spoon. She said, "I liked what he said." The speaker. He talked about how the people closest to the problem are almost never in the room where solutions are designed. She looked at the soup. I wrote it down. Caleb was quiet for a moment. He did remember saying that. He had said it at 6 different events in the same year. He had thought no one in those rooms was listening to the parts that weren't about money. "He sounds like someone who'd been paying attention," he said. "He sounded like someone who was tired of the gap between what people say and what they do," she said. I appreciated it. They finished dinner. He washed the dishes while she worked at the table. It was a small act. He'd done it the night before, too. But she'd said thank you both times, and she'd said it like she meant it, not like it was reflexive. He had started to understand that almost nothing Nadia said was reflexive. She said what she meant, and only what she meant, and the economy of it was something he hadn't encountered in years. After she went to bed, he found himself standing at her bookshelf. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. Then he saw the book with the worn spine, the one he'd noticed from across the room earlier. He pulled it out carefully and opened to the inside cover. The handwriting read, "For my daughter, who has always known what matters, Grandma Bia." Beneath that, the recipe for beef stew was written in the same careful hand, with small notes in the margins. More bay leaf, and let it go longer than you think, and at the bottom, patience makes the difference. He closed it gently and put it back. He stood there for a moment. Then he took it out again and opened it to the stew page, and left it out on the kitchen counter, open. He went back to the couch and lay down and looked at the ceiling. He was running out of reasons to stay that held up under logic. The data was collected. The summit was waiting. Robert Cross had sent 6 messages in the past 48 hours, each one more carefully worded than the last, which meant Robert was worried but too professional to say so. The 30-day experiment had been his idea, a CEO's version of a controlled study, designed to answer a question about the world that no financials report could answer. He had his answer. He had 92 names. The problem was that none of the 92 felt like this. He stayed awake for a long time. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, he heard Nadia's door open. She was getting water, he guessed, and he heard her stop in the kitchen. A pause. Then her soft voice. "How did you find this?" "It was on the shelf," he said. Another pause. "She wrote the whole thing in there, all her recipes. I keep it, but I never," she stopped. "I keep meaning to make this one." "You should." "Yeah, a quiet beat." "Okay. Good night, Cal. Good night, good night." The door closed. He stared at the ceiling. The next morning, Nadia came into the kitchen and stopped. He was standing at the stove. The apartment smelled like slow-cooked beef and bay leaf. He had found everything in her pantry, most of it, anyway, and supplemented what was missing with a quiet early trip to the corner store, using the cash from the envelope she'd given because it was the only money he had in this apartment that felt honest. She stood in the doorway in a loose sweater and looked at the pot on the stove and then at him. "The recipe said to let it go longer than you think," he said. She crossed the kitchen and looked over his shoulder at the pot. She was close enough that he was aware of the warmth of her. She read the margin note. Her voice when she spoke was very quiet. "Yeah," she said. "Patience makes the difference. They ate the stew for breakfast because it was ready and it was there," which Nadia said was empirically the correct choice, and the whole thing felt so ordinary and so specific that Caleb had the disorienting sensation of having forgotten, temporarily, everything he was supposed to be doing with his life. After breakfast, they washed the dishes together. Nadia handed him a plate to dry and said, "Without looking up, I think we should get married." He stopped drying. "I know it's fast," she said. She was still washing. Her voice was even. "And I know you haven't told me everything about yourself. But I know enough about who you are from the past 2 days, and I don't want to pretend I don't feel what I feel." Now she handed him another plate. "You can say no. But I wanted you to know." The plate was warm from the water. He stood there holding it. The world's most successful man, by most metrics anyone used, stood in a small apartment kitchen on the south side of Chicago, and could not think of a single reason to say no. "Okay," he said. She looked at him then. Something in her expression was careful, like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. "Okay," he said again. "Yes." She smiled, a small, private smile, the kind that didn't need anyone else in the room to make sense. She handed him a third plate. He dried it. The city went on outside the window, entirely unaware. The first thing Nadia did was call her mother. Monica Osi answered on the third ring, which meant she was home and not distracted. Her voice was warm in the way it always was in the first 30 seconds of a phone call, before information arrived that required a different register. "Mama," Nadia said. She was sitting at the kitchen table. Caleb was in the other room giving her space without being asked. She noticed that. "I have something to tell you," she told her. Not everything, the full shape of it, no embellishment, no softening. She had met someone. She had spent the past few days getting to know him. They had decided to get married. Monica's voice went through a small audible adjustment. The warmth was still there, but its pitch changed, like a room whose air has shifted. "Tell me about him," Monica said. "He's Cal. He's kind. He's thoughtful. He listens when I talk." "What does he do?" Nadia looked at the doorway to the other room. "He had a business. He's been rebuilding." A pause. "Rebuilding? What kind of rebuilding, Mama? I'm not asking you to approve him yet. I'm telling you he exists, Nadia." Her mother's voice was careful now. "I just want to know who my daughter is marrying. I know. I'll bring him to meet you." The call ended with Monica saying she'd think about it, which Nadia had learned over 28 years meant she was already deciding something. In the background of the call, she had heard her sister Priya's voice, one word, possibly a question, before Monica had gone quiet. She set the phone down. Caleb came back to the kitchen doorway. "That went fine," Nadia said. He looked at her. It didn't sound fine. "It went the way it goes," she said. "She needs time." She stood and went to the window. "My mother is. She loves me in the way that means she's made a lot of decisions about what my life should look like. It took her a while to understand that I meant it when I said no to the corporate path. It'll take her a while here too. And your sister?" "Priya is," she paused. "Priya optimizes. She would have picked a different trajectory for me. She always has." She turned from the window. "Don't worry about them. They're not the ones getting married." Caleb nodded. He went to the counter and poured himself coffee. He said, without turning around, "There are things I need to tell you about myself." "I want to. I'm asking for a little more time before I do." She was quiet. He turned to face her. "I need you to trust me until I can explain properly." She studied him for a long moment, the kind of study that felt like it was looking at something other than his face. Then she said, "2 questions. Okay, are you dangerous?" "No. Are you honest?" He held that. He thought about the encrypted phone in his jacket, the 30 days of careful omission, the property transfer he'd instructed Robert to start without telling her why or what she'd receive. The ring Robert was already sourcing. "I'm trying to be," he said. Something passed across her face. Not doubt, more like the recognition of a specific kind of difficulty. She nodded once. "Okay," she said. "I trust that." He wasn't sure he deserved it. He drank his coffee. That evening, he stepped out to the building's stairwell and called Robert Cross. "The transfer," he said. "Is it in motion?" "The Lincoln Park building changes title as of Monday," Robert said. "Nadia Osi. Her address matches public records." I confirmed it. "Is there anything else?" "The ring. I have options." "Do you want me to send photographs? Just pick the right one. You've known me long enough." A pause. "Sir," Robert said, in the careful tone he used when he was about to say something Caleb wasn't going to enjoy. "The summit." Another pause. 14 industry leaders have confirmed. The media has a statement prepared. The deputy can chair, but they're expecting you. I know. How much longer? Caleb leaned against the stairwell wall. He could hear Nadia moving around in the apartment on the other side of the door. "She doesn't know anything yet," he said. "I need to tell her properly, not in the middle of everything else." "I understand that," Robert said. "But the longer you wait—" "I know, Robert." Silence. "I'll be there," Caleb said, "after this and is settled. Tell them the chairman sends his regards and that there will be an announcement of unusual significance at the appropriate time. That will generate questions. Let it." He hung up and stood in the stairwell for a moment. Through the door, he could hear Nadia's phone ringing, her sister again, probably. He heard her answer it. Her voice was slightly lower than usual. He went back inside. She was standing by the window, her back to him, the phone to her ear. Her posture was different, tighter. He went to the kitchen and gave her the room. He heard her say, "Priya, I know what I'm doing." A pause. "I'm not asking for approval." A longer pause during which the voice on the other end was audible even from the kitchen, fast, insistent, too low to make out exactly. Then Nadia said quietly, "I'll talk to Mama when I'm ready." She hung up. He heard her stand still in the room for a moment. Then she came into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, and stood there looking at it without taking anything out. "Sisters," he said. "Sisters," she agreed. She closed the refrigerator and turned around. Her expression had settled back to its usual steadiness, but it cost her something. He could see that. She had been managing other people's fear of her choices for a long time. It was not new to her. It was just tiring. 2 days, he said quietly. "I'll explain everything in 2 days. She looked at him. "You keep saying that. I mean it every time." She gave him a long, measuring look. Then she pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet and started making tea. "Okay," she said. 2 days. On the other end of the city, in the house on Nouth Sass where Nadia had grown up, Monica Ose sat at her kitchen table and said nothing for a long time after Priya relayed what she'd heard. Then she said, "We don't have 2 days." And Priya said, "I know. I'll handle it." Donna had called it in at 8 in the morning. She'd been working the same overnight volunteer shift at the Southside Outreach Center and recognized Nadia's new guest. From a photo Nadia had texted her, casually, just a picture of the two of them at the kitchen table, Caleb looking sideways at something Nadia had apparently just said. Donna had stared at that photo for most of her shift. By the time she'd processed what she thought she was looking at, her shift was over and she was calling Monica Osei directly. Monica had a sister-in-law who volunteered at the same center. Information traveled. By 9 that morning, Monica had confirmation. The man in Nadia's photograph had been sitting outside Drake Tower with a cardboard sign and a paper cup for at least 3 weeks. Multiple people had seen him. There was footage. Someone had posted it to a neighborhood Facebook group 11 days ago with the caption, "This guy's been here every day. Anybody know him?" And the post had 23 comments, most of them expressing mild concern. Monica sat with this information and felt something harden in her chest that she would have called protection if she'd been pressed to name it. She called Priya at 9:15. By noon, Priya was at the house. She had her laptop. She had a name. Cal. She had the neighborhood where Nadia lived. She did not yet have a last name, but she had the shelter network inquiry that Donna had started and a thread of details Nadia had shared over the previous 2 days in texts. She scrolled through her sister's messages with the quiet efficiency of someone cataloging a threat. She gave him money, Priya said. Monica said nothing. 4,000. She said it was her emergency fund. Priya kept scrolling. She made him soup. She went to the thrift store. A pause. "Mama, she's serious." Monica looked at the window. "She's always serious," she said. "That's the problem." She was quiet for a moment. "Then she'll never agree to stop seeing him if we ask. You know her." "I know," Priya said. "Then we don't ask." Priya looked at her. Monica said, "She left her phone here last week when she came for dinner. She forgets it sometimes." She paused. "Call him." From her phone. "Tell him she's changed her mind." Priya put the laptop down slowly. "Mama, you said you'd handle it. This is handling it. If she finds out, she won't find out if it works," Monica said. Priya sat there for a long moment. Something moved through her expression that she didn't say out loud. Then she picked up her sister's phone, which Monica had kept in the kitchen drawer for 2 days without mentioning it. She found the contact. She pressed call. It rang twice. "Nadia." His voice was quiet. Direct, not a question, recognition. "Cal," Priya said. She had practiced the tone. Nadia's cadence was slightly slower, with a habit of drawing out the vowel at the end of names. Priya was good at mimicry. It was, her whole life, one of the things she was good at. "I've been thinking." "Okay," he said. She made herself pause, the way Nadia paused, not out of hesitation, but out of the habit of choosing words. "I don't think this is going to work. I think we were moving too fast, and I need some time. A beat. I need you to stop calling me." Silence on the other end. She waited. He said, "Nadia, she can't talk right now." Monica had taken the phone from her hand without warning and was speaking with the complete composure of someone who had decided that composure was the most effective weapon available. "She doesn't want to speak with you. She's asked me to tell you not to call again. The engagement is over." A pause. When he spoke, his voice was very even. "Ma'am, I'd like to hear that from Nadia directly." "You've heard it from me," Monica said. "That is enough." She ended the call. Priya sat with her hands flat on the table. Monica set the phone face down on the counter. Then she opened the drawer beneath the kitchen sink, took out a small glass of water that was still sitting there from the night before, and placed Nadia's phone in it. Priya stared at the glass. "That solves the contact problem," Monica said. She was already moving toward the living room. "Call Tyler Ashford. Tell him the timing has improved." Nadia came home at 6 to find her phone not on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. She looked around the apartment. She checked the table, the couch, the bathroom. She called it from her laptop. No ring, no vibration. She stood in the kitchen doorway and thought carefully about the last time she'd had it. The apartment felt quieter than usual. She became aware, in a very specific way, that she hadn't heard from Caleb since that morning. She went to the window and looked out at the street. The evening traffic was normal. Nothing was wrong that she could identify. But something felt displaced. The small internal shift of realizing that a piece of information you were depending on is no longer in the place you put it. She sat down and opened her laptop. His number was in her email from 2 days ago when she'd written it down in case. She called it from her laptop through the voice application. It rang and went to a voicemail that said nothing, just a beep. She sat there. She tried once more. Nothing. She sat with that for a long time, running through what she knew. She had not said anything wrong. They had not argued. The last conversation had been ordinary and warm and entirely without subtext. She had told him 2 days. He had said he understood. Something was wrong, and she couldn't see the shape of it. She thought about calling her mother. Then she thought about what Priya had said the previous night. "I'll talk to Mama," and the quality of Priya's voice when she'd said it, which had been careful in the wrong way. Not worried. Strategic. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she stood up, put on her coat, and went across the hall to her neighbor's apartment. Marcus answered in a sweatshirt, surprised. "I need to borrow your phone," Nadia said, "just for 2 minutes." He handed it over without question. She typed in the number from memory. She held the phone up to her ear. It rang. She said nothing for a moment when it connected. Then, carefully, "It wasn't me. Come." She handed the phone back to Marcus, said thank you, and went back inside. She stood in her kitchen in her coat and waited. The call confirmed what Caleb had already suspected. He knew Nadia's voice. He knew the particular rhythm of her sentences, where she paused, how she waited the end of a question, the slight uptick when she was choosing her words with extra care. The woman on the phone had studied that rhythm. She hadn't quite gotten it right. He called Robert Cross the moment the line went dead. "I need you to verify a call," he said, from her number. 10 minutes ago. He gave Robert the number. "Tell me where it originated." Robert called back in 4 minutes. "The call came from Monica Osie's address," he said. "South Side." "The number is registered to Nadia, but the cell tower data puts the call 9 miles from her apartment. And the text I just received? Different origin point. Nadia's building, sent from a different device. Her neighbor, based on the registered address." Caleb sat with that for a moment. "Understood," he said. "I'm going." "Sir." Robert's voice had the careful quality it got when he was about to be more forthcoming than usual. "You've been in the field for 30 days. You're not exactly. I'm fine. You're in a thrift store suit. I've made decisions in worse clothing." A pause. "Do you want backup?" "No. I want you to be reachable." He paused. "And Robert, how close is the team to the city?" "We've been in a hotel downtown since the summit prep. We can be anywhere in 20 minutes. Stay close." He took the L train to the south side. He sat in the corner of the car and watched the city pass and thought about what he was walking into. He was not naive about this. He was about to knock on the door of a woman who had already tried to erase him, in a neighborhood where he had no standing, in clothing that communicated exactly what he had spent a month communicating to everyone he encountered. The social arithmetic was entirely against him. He had never particularly cared about social arithmetic. The house host was a solid 2-flat on a tree-lined block. Clean. Well kept. The kind of house that represented 40 years of consistent effort. He walked up to the gate and stopped. 2 men were standing at the entrance. They were not large, but they were deliberate, the particular stance of people who had been told to be present in a specific way. They looked at him when he approached. "I'm here for Nadia Osei," he said. "We're engaged." The taller of the 2 looked him over. "She doesn't want to see you. I'd like to hear that from her." "You've heard it," the man said. "Go." A few neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, not a crowd yet, but the beginning of one. A woman in a housecoat 2 doors down was watching from her porch. A man with a dog had paused across the street. Caleb stayed where he was. He did not raise his voice. He did not approach and said, clearly, enough for the immediate area to hear. "My name is Cal. I'm Nadia Osei's fiancé. She sent me a message this afternoon telling me to come. I would like to speak with her." The neighbor on the porch called out, "Don't let him in." Another voice said something that involved the word beggar. The man at the gate said, "Last time. Walk away." A car pulled up behind him. An expensive car, quiet engine, dark finish, the kind of vehicle that announced money without trying to. Tyler Ashford got out. He was wearing a suit that had not come from a thrift store. He looked at Caleb with the particular expression of someone who has found the situation exactly as convenient as he'd hoped. Is there a problem? Tyler said. No problem, the man at the gate said. Just a misunderstanding. Come in. He stepped aside for Tyler without being asked. Caleb watched Tyler walk through the gate that was still closed to him. He said nothing. Inside the house, he could hear voices. Monica, sharp and definitive, and under it, Nadia, controlled but present. Then Prisha's voice, she'll cooperate. Nadia's voice, clearly. I won't. Caleb stood at the gate and listened to the argument he could not see. He heard the specific pitch of someone being pressed into a corner, not loudly, but with the relentless patience of people who had decided the outcome before the conversation started. He heard Nadia say his name. He put his hand on the gate. Don't, one of the men said. He took his hand off the gate, and then from inside the house he heard a sound that was different from all the others, a sharp, involuntary gasp, and then a thud, and then Priya's voice in a register that had nothing to do with strategy. Mama, Mama. Silence, then screaming. Caleb was through the gate before either man could react. He moved past them without touching them. He was through the front door in 4 seconds. Monica Osei was on the kitchen floor. She was conscious but barely, her body rigid with a kind of trembling stillness that he recognized from training he had done years ago. For situations like this, the narrow, specific training that most people his age hadn't sought out, but that he had after a business trip to a city without adequate emergency services. He dropped to one knee beside her. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was present but irregular. Call 911, he said. No emphasis. Clean instruction. Nobody moved. Now, he said in a different voice. The voice that in a different context ran quarterly calls with 14 global executives who did not argue with it. 3 phones came out at once. He tilted her head carefully, confirming airway, checked her pupils, kept his fingers on her pulse and tracked its pattern. Priya was crouched on the other side, pale and rigid. He told her where to put her hands. She did exactly what he said without questioning it. Nadia appeared in the kitchen doorway. She stopped when she saw him. She took in the scene in 1 second, her mother on the floor, Caleb at her side, Priya following his instructions. She crossed the kitchen and knelt beside her mother's other shoulder. She's stable, he said. Her pulse is irregular. It may be arrhythmia. The ambulance needs to know that when they arrive. How do you? Priya started. Tell them irregular pulse, possible arrhythmia, 62 seconds of episode, he said. She's conscious. That's critical. Priya relayed it to the 911 operator with her voice shaking. They held the position until the paramedics arrived. Monica opened her eyes twice during the wait. The second time, she looked directly at Caleb. He looked back at her with the steady, specific attention of someone whose entire focus was on keeping her present. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression changed, not into warmth, not yet, but into a kind of confusion that was the beginning of a question she couldn't yet form. The paramedics arrived. They took over. Caleb stood and stepped back. Nadia stood beside him. She didn't say anything. She took his hand. Outside, Tyler Ashford was standing near the front gate. He had been there through all of it, on the periphery, neither helping nor leaving. He looked at Caleb now with a different expression than the one he'd arrived with. He took out his phone and made one quiet call. Bring everything tomorrow, he said low, facing the street. I want it visible from a block away. Monica came home from the hospital that evening. The arrhythmia had been brief, they said. A vagal event triggered by acute stress. Her heart was otherwise fine. Her doctor recommended rest, reduced stress, and the particular kind of follow-up that Monica immediately described to Priya as not necessary. She was home by 9, sitting at the kitchen table in the same house, where she had, 8 hours earlier, orchestrated a deception that she had not yet been asked to account for. Nadia sat across from her. They did not speak for a long time. I know you called him from my phone, Nadia said, finally. Monica looked at her hands. I know Priya told him I didn't want to see him. Nadia's voice was even. Not raised, I know you destroyed my phone. I was protecting, you were managing me, Nadia said. Like you always manage me. Like my choices are a project you can fix. She paused. He came anyway. He was at the gate and those men wouldn't let him through, and he stayed there until you needed help. And then he helped you. Monica said nothing. Did you ask yourself why? Nadia said, Why someone you tried to erase would do that. The kitchen was very quiet. Nadia stood up. I'm not angry tonight. I don't have the energy for it. But this isn't over. She looked at her mother. And Tyler Ashford is not coming into this house for me. She went upstairs. Caleb was not there. He had gone back to the apartment when Nadia had insisted on staying with her mother overnight. She had given him a key, which she had done without ceremony and without asking permission from anyone. He had taken it with equal plainness. The next morning, Tyler arrived as promised. He came with 4 vehicles and a plan. The SUVs pulled up to the block just after 10, and the neighborhood noticed immediately because that was the point of it. The vehicles were dark and polished, and the kind of expensive that made people stop and calculate. His people unloaded boxes from the back of the second vehicle, a jewelry case, a small locked box that Tyler said contained cash, a rolled document that he described as an apartment lease in Gold Coast, already in Nadia's name. Monica was on the porch. She could not fully stand for extended periods after last night's episode, but she had refused to do this from a chair inside. She sat in the porch chair with the particular composure of a woman managing appearances while managing recovery, and she watched Tyler present his contributions with the careful attention of someone tallying a negotiation. The block had gathered. Tyler had counted on that. Caleb arrived on foot from the direction of the L station. He was wearing the jacket Nadia had bought him, the one that had some wear but held its shape. He carried a small bag. He did not arrive with vehicles. He did not arrive with an entourage. He came the same way he'd come the day before. The crowd's murmur shifted when they saw him. He walked up to the house. Nadia was standing on the bottom porch step, and she turned when she heard his footsteps. Tyler watched him approach with visible satisfaction. I thought you were done, he said. I'm here for Nadia, Caleb said. Nadia's occupied, Tyler said. He gestured toward the display behind him, the vehicles, the boxes, the document tube. We're in the middle of something. I can see that. Tyler turned to the crowd. He had the instincts of someone who had learned that an audience makes things easier. Let's be clear about something, he said, loud enough for the block to hear. This man showed up here yesterday, uninvited, and caused a scene that sent this woman's mother to the hospital. He looked at Monica. I'm sorry about that, by the way. Truly. He looked back at the crowd. I'm here with a legitimate offer, real resources, and genuine respect for this family. He looked at Caleb. He's here with, what exactly? The small bag in Caleb's hand, the thrift store jacket, the fact of him standing on a sidewalk in the south side of Chicago in a suit that had been purchased for $12 3 days ago. A conversation, Caleb said. There was laughter. Tyler let it settle. Then, I'll make you a straightforward offer. Walk away now, and we'll call this a misunderstanding. Or, he gestured to the street behind him, show us what you have. Anything. A car, a bank statement. Some evidence that you're who you're asking this family to believe you are. He spread his hands. Because I have mine. Show us yours. More laughter. A few voices from the crowd. He's got a point. A woman near the back. That poor man should just go. Nadia was on the bottom step. She had not moved. She said, quietly enough that only the people close to her could hear, You don't have to do this. Caleb looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. Not resignation, not defeat. The particular look of someone who has decided that the moment for holding back has passed. He took out his phone. Not the prop phone he'd carried for 30 days. The real one, the encrypted one, the one with the private number that connected directly to Robert Cross's desk. He pressed one button. He said when it connected, Robert, bring them. Then he put the phone in his pocket. Tyler looked at him. Bring what, exactly? Caleb looked at Nadia, not at Tyler, not at the crowd, at her. 2 minutes, he said. The block went about its business. Someone laughed again. Somewhere down the street, from the direction of the main road, there was a sound, low at first, barely distinguishable from ordinary traffic, then slightly louder, then recognizable as the collective approach of multiple vehicles. Tyler heard it first because he was still making a calculation. Then everyone heard it. Heads turned toward the end of the block. The sound kept coming. Vanessa Whitmore had been watching from the end of the block for 20 minutes. She had heard about the scene yesterday from a contact at the outreach center. She still maintained a few charitable affiliations that kept her close to the right information flows, and she had come because she had decided that if there was an opportunity to reclaim some part of the narrative she'd lost when Caleb ended their relationship, this was it. She had the video on her phone. She had taken it personally 3 weeks ago, walking past Drake Tower. Before she knew it was him, she'd filmed the man at the corner because she'd thought it was sad, and she'd planned to post it to the neighborhood Facebook group the same way everyone else did. Then she'd looked more closely at the footage. She'd recognized his hands first, then the line of his jaw. Then, when he'd looked up for a moment toward the sound of someone dropping coins nearby, she'd seen his face clearly. She had not posted the video. She had kept it, which was the version of power she understood best. The thing you had that the other person didn't know you had. She watched Tyler's display from the sidewalk and thought about timing. She watched Caleb arrive on foot. She watched him make the call. She waited until the crowd's attention was fully on the end of the block, on the approaching sound of vehicles they couldn't yet see, and then she walked forward into the yard. "Since we're showing evidence," she said, loud enough for the porch to hear. Several heads turned. She had the phone out. She pressed play. The screen faced the crowd. On the screen, a man sat on concrete outside Drake Tower with a cardboard sign. Help with food money. The cup in front of him. The people walking past. His face, when he looked up, Caleb's face. The crowd looked from the screen to the man standing in the yard. The resemblance required no explanation. "That's your fiancé," Vanessa said to Nadia, with the particular pleasantness of someone who has been waiting a long time to say something. Sitting outside a luxury building, begging. 3 weeks ago, before the suit, she paused. "He's been lying to you. He wasn't rebuilding from a failed business. He was on the street." She looked at Caleb. Wasn't he? The crowd was very quiet. Monica looked at the video screen and then at Caleb with an expression that was complicated. Not the simple satisfaction of vindication, because Monica had seen him at her kitchen floor and the memory was too recent for simple satisfaction. Tyler Sebas. "I think that's your answer." Nadia had not moved. She was still on the bottom step. She looked at the phone, at the footage, at Caleb. He was watching her face. She said, "I know." Vanessa blinked. "I know he was on the street," Nadia said. "I was there." She looked at the crowd. "I walked past him and then I came back, because I don't make decisions I'm ashamed of." She looked at Vanessa. "I don't know who you are or why you brought that here, but the footage doesn't tell me anything I didn't choose in full awareness." Vanessa said nothing. "You want to show me who he is?" Nadia said. "I can show you. He found my grandmother's recipe book. He made the stew. He pushed down the laver on the toaster twice without being told. He moved 12 people out of the way to get to my mother when she collapsed, and he knew exactly what to do, and he didn't leave until she was stable." She looked at Caleb. "That's who he is. I don't care what it looked like from the outside." The block was quiet. From the end of the street, the sound of approaching vehicles had grown distinct now, not one or two, but several, moving with the unhurried precision of a procession that had no reason to hurry because it was the loudest thing on the street. Tyler's head turned. His expression did something complicated. The first vehicle came around the corner. Then the third. They were executive SUVs, dark and quiet, and there were 4 of them in the front, and behind them were sedans, and behind those were 3 more SUVs, and the convoy took up the full block and kept coming and did not stop until every available space at the curb was full. The street went silent. Not the silence of uncertainty, the silence of recalibration. Doors opened. People emerged, men and women in business attire, not loud, not performing, just present in the specific way of people who operated at a level where presence was its own statement. Faces the crowd half recognized, faces that belonged to television screens and business section photographs, and the kind of events that normal people drove past on their way to other things. Vanessa put her phone down. Tyler watched the vehicles and said nothing. His convoy of 4 SUVs was parked in the middle of the street, and now it looked like a different category of thing entirely. The last door of the lead vehicle opened. Robert Cross stepped out. He was 62 years old with gray at his temples and the posture of a man who had never needed to raise his voice. He looked at the yard, at Tyler, at Vanessa, at Monica on the porch, at the crowd, and then he looked at Caleb. He walked forward. The crowd gave him room automatically, the way crowds give room to people who emanate authority rather than demanding it. He stopped beside Caleb. He turned to face the yard. He said nothing for a long moment. He looked at the assembled faces with the patience of someone who was allowing people to finish their calculations at their own speed. Then he cleared his throat. "My name is Robert Cross," he said, his voice carried without effort. "I am the Chief of Operations for Weston Group." He paused. "And this is my chairman." The crowd understood before anyone explained. That was how this worked, Caleb knew. Not all at once, but in a wave. One person reaching for their phone and others watching their expression change and reaching for their own. Within 60 seconds, 8 phones were up. Within 90, a woman near the gate said his name, his full name, the way when they were confirming a thing they couldn't quite believe they were looking at. Caleb Weston. Tyler Ashford's phone had not moved. He was still standing in front of his 4 vehicles and henna boxes, which had not changed in size or value, but which had undergone a complete transformation in what they represented. He looked at Caleb. He looked at the convoy. He looked at Robert Cross, who had been on business news programs 6 times in the past 2 years, and whose face was, now that it was here in person, recognizable in a way that foreclosed all argument. Tyler said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not make this worse. Robert Cross was speaking again, quietly, professionally, covering the points that needed to be covered. He confirmed the Weston Group. He confirmed the 30-day undercover period that had been discussed at the summit debrief earlier in the week. 3 of the executives standing at the curb had been at that debrief. They were here because they had asked to be here and because Caleb had not said no. They confirmed, when asked directly by members of the crowd who were still working through their recalibration, that yes, the man standing in the thrift store jacket was the same man who had chaired that meeting. Vanessa Whitmore had put her phone in her pocket 10 minutes ago. She was standing near the gate, not going in and not going out, in the particular paralysis of someone whose strategy has reversed on them completely. She had brought the footage to damage him. The footage had instead generated the conditions for the reveal. She understood this, and the understanding was visible in her expression, and she did not try to explain herself to anyone because there was nothing to say. Priya was standing near the kitchen doorway on the porch. She had come outside when the first vehicles arrived, the way everyone had. She looked at the convoy, and at Robert Cross, and at Caleb, and then she looked at her mother. Monica was sitting in the porch chair. She was not looking at the vehicles or the executives or the crowd's recalibration. She was looking at Caleb. Just at Caleb. The man she had tried to erase, through a lie made in her daughter's voice, through a phone placed in water, through hired security and a rival suitor, and the full weight of her social architecture, was standing in her yard in a $12 jacket, while people confirmed on their phones that he was worth more than she could conceptualize. She sat with that. Tyler's people had begun, quietly, to load the boxes back into the vehicles. They didn't announce it. They just started doing it, because Tyler had made the wordless calculation that remaining was no longer in his interest. He said one thing before he got in the car. He said it to no one in particular, in the tone of someone completing a sentence that would otherwise look unfinished. "Good for you," he said. Whether he meant Caleb or Nadia or the situation in general, he didn't specify. His convoy left without ceremony, and the street was suddenly very wide. Nadia was standing still. She had not moved from the bottom step during any of it. She had watched the vehicles arrive. She had watched Robert Cross speak. She had heard people say the name. She had heard the confirmation from people who had no reason to lie. She had seen Vanessa quietly disappear through the gate. She was not triumphant. She was not relieved. She was doing what Nadia did when the information required processing. She was very still, and she was thinking. Caleb looked at her. The crowd was still present, talking, some of them filming. Robert Cross was fielding quiet conversations with a few of the executives. The block had transformed into something between a neighborhood event and a live news moment, and the sound of it was all around them. Caleb looked at Nadia, and waited. She looked back at him. Her expression was not angry. It was not even complicated, exactly. It was the face of someone who is in the process of understanding something large, and who is doing it carefully, because she was someone who did things carefully, who had always done things carefully, who had spent years being told that her careful attention to things that other people dismissed was a form of sentimentality. He had been one of those things. She had been told to dismiss him. She hadn't. She stepped down from the bottom step. She walked toward him through the yard. The crowd moved back slightly, the way crowds do when they sense they are witnessing the center of something. She stopped in front of him. She looked at him for a long moment with the look she had, that particular attention that had unsettled him from the very beginning, the one that felt like being actually seen rather than observed. "You have a lot to explain," she said. "I know," he said. "Not here." "No," he agreed. She looked at the convoy, at Robert Cross, at the executives. She looked at the crowd still filming from the sidewalk. She looked back at Caleb. "Did you know you were going to tell me today?" she asked. He had thought about this question. He had known it was coming. He answered it honestly. "I knew I was done waiting." She absorbed that. Then she said, "I need to go inside and talk to my mother." "I'll be here," he said. She nodded once and turned back toward the house. At the porch steps, she stopped and looked at Priya. The two sisters looked at each other for a moment. Priya opened her mouth. Nadia said quietly, "Not yet," and went inside. Priya stood on the porch with her hands at her sides, looking at the street, looking at the convoy, looking at everything she had tried to prevent, and everything she had made possible by trying to prevent it. Monica was still in the chair. Caleb stood in the yard and waited. Robert Cross came to stand beside him. They stood together without talking for a while, watching the street return to something like its ordinary shape. "You could have had the driver bring a better suit," Robert said eventually. "No," Caleb said. "I couldn't." Robert looked at him. "This is the one she bought me," Caleb said. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, professionally, without sentiment, "Understood." The kitchen of Monica Osi's house was a room that had absorbed 40 years of decision-making. Nadia knew this room better than any other. She had done homework at this table. She had had arguments at this table. She had sat across from her father at this table for the last conversation they'd ever had, which had been entirely ordinary and which she had never stopped being grateful for. The table was the same table. The chairs were the same chairs. The curtains on the window were different. Monica had replaced them twice since Nadia left for college, but the quality of light through the window at midday was exactly the same. She sat down. Monica came inside and sat across from her. Priya stood in the doorway and then, after a moment, came in and sat too. Nobody spoke. Nadia looked at her mother. Monica's color had returned to something close to normal since last night, and the hospital had cleared her to be home, but there was something in her posture that was different, a small subsidence, like a structure that has passed through a stress test and come out on the other side with its shape, but not quite its original tension. "Tell me what you did," Nadia said. Monica looked at the table. "Mama." Nadia's voice was not unkind. It was the voice of someone who needed the truth from this specific person, in this specific kitchen, and was prepared to wait for it. Monica told her. The call from Donna's contact, the decision, the phone call, Priya's voice, Nadia's number. The phone in the water. Monica described it in the particular clipped way of someone confessing things they had already concluded were indefensible but had committed to anyway. Nadia listened. When Monica finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Priya said, "I knew it was wrong. I want you to know I knew. Why did you do it?" Nadia asked. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because Mama asked me to." And because, she stopped. Started again. "Because I have an arrangement with the Ashford family. A business arrangement. Tyler and I have been in discussion for 6 months about a partnership for my division. If he married you, it formalized things." She looked at the table. "I didn't tell Mama that part." Monica looked at her older daughter. "You had a stake in it," Nadia said. "Yes." The kitchen absorbed that. Nadia looked at her mother for a long time. "He saved your life," she said. "The man you told me to forget. You were on the floor and he was the one who knew what to do." She paused. "Did you ask yourself why someone would do that?" For you? Monica looked at her hands. I asked him, she said quietly. What did he say? He said, because you were in front of me and you needed help. Monica paused. He said it like it was the only possible answer. The kitchen was very quiet. Monica said, I was afraid. I want you to understand that. I know fear isn't an excuse, but I was afraid that you would end up like, she stopped, that you would sacrifice your practical security for something that felt real and then be alone in 10 years trying to hold it together by yourself. The way I... After your father. She looked at Nadia directly, for the first time in the conversation. I was trying to stop that from happening to you. I went about it completely wrong. Nadia sat with that. She did not say it's okay. It was not okay. She did not say I forgive you, because forgiveness was not a thing she dispensed in real time, and Monica, above anyone else, knew that about her. She said, I hear you. Monica nodded. But I need you to understand something, Nadia said. My choices are mine. The fact that one of them turned out to be the richest man in the world, that's not the point. I didn't know that. I chose him when he had nothing that the world could see. That's the version I'm living in. She looked at her mother steadily. And that's the version I'd choose again. Monica was quiet for a long time. Then she said, simply, I know. Outside, the crowd had largely dispersed by the time Nadia came back through the front door. The convoy was still there. Robert Cross had made no move to leave. And the industry leaders had settled into the comfortable patience of people who understood that the important part of the day was still in progress. A few neighbors remained on the sidewalk, some distance back, observing with the respectful discretion of people who had already formed their opinions and were now simply witnesses. Caleb was where she'd left him. Standing in the yard, the suit that had come from a thrift store, the encrypted phone in his jacket pocket, everything. She walked to him. He turned when he heard her. She said, walk with me. They walked to the end of the block and turned onto a quieter side street, away from the convoy and the neighbors and the specific weight of the yard. The afternoon had gone cool. The leaves on the trees were starting their first turn toward October. She walked for a full minute without saying anything. He matched her pace. Tell me everything, she said, from the beginning. So he did. He told her about the question he'd been trying to answer for 3 years, whether the people around him were drawn to him or to what he represented. He told her about the study he'd designed, the 30 days, the protocols. He told her about day 1. Standing outside Drake Tower with a cardboard sign and thinking it would be a controlled exercise that would give him clean data. He told her about the 92 people. He told her about the ones who gave large and the ones who gave small, and the handful who stopped long enough to actually ask his name. He told her that none of it had felt like what it felt like on day 28, when she crouched down and asked if he'd eaten. He told her about the property transfer, the Lincoln Park building, the lease already in her name. He told her about the ring. He told her about pushing back the summit, which had cost him a level of professional credibility that Robert Cross had been quietly managing ever since. He told her that the call he'd received from Priya, in her voice, had been wrong in 4 ways he could identify immediately, and that he had called Robert before the call was cold to verify its origin. He told her, I was already on my way when your text came through. She was quiet for a long time after he finished. They had stopped walking without deciding to. They were standing on a block of small brick houses with tended front gardens, the kind of neighborhood that had held its shape against pressure for decades. You saw everything, she said. Not an accusation. A kind of wonder, yes. The grandmother's recipe book. The toast with the lever pressed twice. Yes, she looked at the street. You saw things I don't even present. Things I just do. She paused. That's strange. To be seen that specifically, I know, he said. She looked at him. I need you to know something. Her voice was level. I'm not going to tell you this is fine, because it isn't completely fine. You kept a significant truth from me. I understand why you did it. I believe that you were going to tell me, but it's going to take some time. I know, he said, and I need you to be Caleb with me now, not Cal. Not a version of yourself you've decided is easier for other people to manage. She held his gaze, just the real one. He looked at her for a long moment. Okay, he said. Okay, she said, and she started walking back toward the house, and he walked beside her, and the afternoon light came down through the October trees and made the streets look like the kind of street where things begin. 2 weeks later, Nadia was still at her desk at the nonprofit. The office on West Wacker was a second-floor space with uneven heating and a coffee maker that required a specific sequence of button presses to function, and she had been coming here 5 days a week for 3 years, and she intended to keep coming here because the work was real and the problems it addressed were real, and the fact that her personal life had rearranged itself in a direction that most people could not have predicted did not change that. Donna had asked her, on the Monday after everything, whether she was going to keep working. Nadia had looked at her with the expression she used when she encountered a question she found genuinely surprising and said, "Of course, why wouldn't I?" "Huh?" Donna had said, with the patience of a close friend. "You're engaged to a billionaire, Nadia." "I know," Nadia had said. "The grants don't write themselves." The office had taken 3 days to stop being strange. Then it was normal again. She and Caleb had spent the 2 weeks doing something that Nadia thought of as the slow, careful work of getting to know a person whose circumstances had abruptly changed while the person themselves had not. He had moved out of the cover apartment he'd maintained as Cal and was back in his own space, a penthouse on the 42nd floor that she had visited once and that had not, she noted privately, made her feel any differently about the apartment on the 6th floor where she still kept most of her things. He had gone back to running Weston Group. He had 4 times as many calls to make and twice as many apologies to deliver for the weeks of limited access during the experiment. He called her at 7 every morning and at 9 every night, which was not something they had arranged. It had simply happened. And it had kept happening, and neither of them had commented on it because some things are more reliable when they're allowed to be unremarked. He came to her apartment more often than she went to his. She had started to understand that this was deliberate, that the penthouse was where he conducted his life, and the 6th-floor apartment was where he felt it. She had not decided yet what she thought about the ring which was sitting in its box on her kitchen counter. It was, as Robert Cross had promised, not overdone. It was a single stone set simply, the kind of ring that was extraordinary because of what it was, not how it announced itself. She picked it up sometimes and put it back. She was not ready to wear it permanently yet. She was not sure why. She thought it might be that wearing it felt like a declaration she wanted to make in her own time. On the evening of the 14th day, Caleb came to her apartment for dinner. He let himself in with the key she'd given him. She was already cooking, something simple, because it was Tuesday, and Tuesdays were simple. He sat at the kitchen table in the way he had done from the first night, with the ease of someone who had learned very quickly how to exist in a space that wasn't his. They ate. They talked about ordinary things, a funding crisis at her organization, a logistics problem he was working through in the Asia portfolio, a book she had been reading and whether he'd read it. He had, he said, 6 years ago, and he still thought the author had gotten the ending wrong. The conversation was easy in the way of people who have established a pattern and trust it. After they'd done the dishes, he dried his hands on the kitchen towel and turned around and looked at her. She was leaning against the counter with her tea. He reached into his jacket pocket. He set the ring box on the counter between them, not open, just present. He looked at her. "I'm not going to make this a performance," he said. "You've seen enough performances." He paused. "I want to marry you. I wanted to marry you before I told you the truth, and I want to marry you having told you the truth, and I'm prepared to spend whatever time you need being exactly who I am so that you can be completely certain." He looked at the box. "But I wanted you to know that the wanting is real and it's not going anywhere." Nadia looked at the box. She looked at him. She thought about the first night, the conversation at the table, the soup, the ordinary weight of being treated like a person rather than a category. She thought about the recipe book, open on the counter. She thought about the second morning, when he had made a stew from her grandmother's recipe and not made a single thing out of it. And she had understood in that moment that this was a person who paid attention to things because he valued them, not because he wanted credit. She thought about the yard and him standing in it with a $12 jacket and no convoy, arriving on foot because he was coming to tell the truth, and the truth didn't need a vehicle. She picked up the ring box, she opened it. She looked at the ring for a moment. Then she took it out and put it on. Yes, she said. He let out a breath that she understood had been held for a long time. She looked at her hand. The stone caught the kitchen light in the particular way of well-cut things. Not flashy, just clear. "I have 2 conditions," she said. "Okay," he said. "First, you keep coming here for dinner, not the other way around. Done. Second, if you ever lie to me by omission about anything significant ever again, I'm leaving the ring on the kitchen counter and taking the emergency fund." He looked at her. "Which you still owe me," she said. He smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile completely, not the partial, controlled thing he'd allowed himself as Cal, but the real version, the one that reached his eyes and stayed there. "I'll transfer it Monday," he said. "You'd better." Monica called that evening. Nadia answered from the balcony, looking out at the city. The call was brief. Monica's voice was not warm, exactly, not the way it had been before, because some things changed the temperature of a room, but it was present, which was not nothing. "I was wrong," Monica said. Nadia said, "I know." A pause. "I'd like to come to the wedding." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "But Mama, it won't be arranged by you, it won't be arranged by anyone, it'll be ours." "I know," Monica said. That was all. Nadia stayed on the balcony after the call ended. The city was doing what it did, vast and indifferent and full of people making decisions in apartments and on street corners and at kitchen tables, most of them without any idea who was watching or whether it mattered. Caleb came out and stood beside her. He looked at the ring on her hand and then at the city. "The 30 days, she said. "What were you actually trying to find out?" He was quiet for a moment. Whether the world still had people in it who gave because they believed in giving, he said, not because they expected something back. She looked at the city. "And?" 92, he said. "Out of several thousand, about 2%. She thought about that. "That's not much." "No," he said. "But it's not 0. She looked at the ring again, at the stone catching the city light. "What about me specifically?" she said. The 92 stopped. Most of them moved on. He looked at her. "You were different," he said. "You didn't move on. You brought me home. You gave me your emergency fund. You introduced me to your grandmother's recipe. You sent me one sentence from a neighbor's phone in the middle of a crisis and trusted that I'd understand it." He paused. "I wasn't, day 226 days, I wasn't planning to call Robert about a ring. I wasn't planning for any of it." He looked at the city. "You didn't just pass the test, Nadia, you ended it." She stood there for a while. The city hummed below them. The October air was cold enough to feel real. "That's a lot to put on a person," she said. "I know," he said. She leaned against the railing. "Good thing I can handle it." She could hear him almost smile. "I know," he said again. "That's why I stayed." She looked out at the settee for a long time, at the lights and the movement and the millions of ordinary decisions happening in buildings she could see and buildings she couldn't. "The 92, she said. "What happened to them?" "They're all going to receive something," he said. "Support. Real support, the kind that changes the trajectory, not token help." He paused. "Robert is coordinating it," she thought about that. The 92 people who had stopped, the tens of thousands who hadn't. "They don't know why," she said. "No. They'll receive the support, but they won't know the origin." She was quiet for a moment. "That's better, actually," she said. "They don't need to know it was a test. They just need the help to be real." He looked at her. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. That's the right answer." She turned from the railing and looked up at him. The October night was cold enough to see their breath, just slightly. The city went on in every direction, neither for them nor against them, entirely itself. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make tea." He followed her inside. The door closed. The city stayed where it was. Robert Roth's cross announced the engagement on a Wednesday. It was not a press release. Caleb had specifically asked him not to do a press release, and Robert had responded that he understood, and then he had composed a brief, factual statement to accompany the Weston Group's quarterly filing that mentioned, in the second-to-last paragraph, that Caleb Westerton would be reducing his direct, summit appearances for the remainder of the fiscal year in connection with a personal matter of significance, and that the personal matter was a forthcoming marriage. The financial press had filled in the rest within 6 hours. Nadia read about it on her lunch break at the nonprofit. She was sitting at her desk with a sandwich, and she scrolled past it on the news aggregator she used for grant research and stopped, backed up, and read it twice. Then she put her phone down and ate the rest of her sandwich. Donna appeared in the doorway of her office at 12:45. She had her own phone out with the article loaded. "Did you know this was coming?" Donna asked. "The announcement?" Nadia thought about it. "I knew he'd have to say something eventually. The whole city is talking about it. The whole city talks about a lot of things." Donna looked at her for a moment. "You're very calm." "I've had 2 weeks to process," Nadia said. She looked at her screen. "Also, I've met Robert Cross. He has the energy of someone who has been managing large situations without drama for many years. I trusted it would be handled professionally." Donna sat down in the chair across from Nadia's desk, which meant she was staying for a while. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes. Did you ever suspect? Before the convoy?" Nadia thought about this, honestly. She thought about the phrase he'd used at dinner. Good people deserve real investment, not token help. The way his voice changed register when he was on the encrypted phone in the other room. The morning he'd made the stew from her grandmother's recipe and carried no self-consciousness about it, the ease of someone who had cooked in good kitchens. Specific, precise instructions he'd given when her mother was on the floor. "I suspected something was different," she said. "I didn't know what. I thought maybe he'd had a different kind of life than he was saying. Not that he was lying, just that he hadn't told me everything yet." She paused. "He asked me to trust him until he could explain. I did, and that was enough?" Nadia looked at the ring. It was on her hand now, fully. She had put it on the morning after the proposal and hadn't taken it off. She had expected to feel self-conscious about it, but she didn't. It was simply there. "He came to my mother's gate in a $12 jacket," she said. "He had no leverage. He had nothing he could deploy. He came because I asked him to, on a borrowed phone, in 3 words. She looked at Donna. That was enough. The Sunday after the announcement, Nadia drove to her mother's house. It was the first time she'd been back since the morning she'd walked out of the yard with Caleb. The block looked the same. The porch chair was in its usual place. Monica answered the door before she had to knock, which meant she'd been watching. They sat at the kitchen table. Monica had made tea. She set it down in front of Nadia with the particular care of someone making a gesture because they could not yet make the full gesture. She sat across from her and put her hands around her own cup. "I saw the announcement," Monica said. "I know." "I didn't." Monica stopped. Started again. "I didn't know what he was. I want you to know that's not why I'm saying any of this. What I'm saying is not because of what he's worth. I know, Mama. I was wrong to do what I did." Monica looked at her cup. "I don't expect you to erase it. I know it doesn't work that way." She paused. "But I want to be in your life. I want to be there when you get married. And I understand if that takes time." Nadia looked at her mother, the woman who had raised her, who had held Fiat together for 4 years after her father died, who had been afraid in the specific way that fear sometimes disguises itself as management and control. She was not the enemy. She had behaved badly from a place of fear, which didn't excuse it, but which Nadia understood. "It takes time," Nadia said. "But yes, I want you there." Monica looked up. "I need you to let me have my choices," Nadia said. "Not just this one. All of them. Going forward." She held her mother's gaze. "Can you do that?" Monica was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I can try. That's honest," Nadia said. "I'll take it." They drank their tea. The kitchen was quiet in the way it had always been quiet on Sunday afternoons, settled, familiar, the specific piece of a room that had absorbed enough history to rest in it. Priya was not there. They did not talk about Priya. That would be a different conversation on a different Sunday when Nadia was ready for it. That evening, Caleb picked her up. Not in the corporate SUV, in an ordinary car, the kind she had not known he owned, which he said he kept for when he wanted to move through the city like a person rather than an announcement. She got in, and he looked at her face and said, "How did it go?" "Better than it could have," she said. "Worse than I'd like." "About where I expected," He nodded. They drove through the city without a particular destination for a while, the way you drive when you want the motion rather than the arrival. The October streets were full of the last warm light before things turned cold for good. People were outside, walking, standing at corners, sitting on front steps, making ordinary decisions in ordinary moments that no one would catalog or remember. Nadia watched them from the passenger window. "The 92 people," she said. "Do you think they know they were part of something?" "No," he said. "They just stopped. They just helped. And the support, when it comes, they won't know why. No." She thought about that. The not knowing. The action that happens before you have any information about what it will become. She looked at the ring on her hand. She looked at the street. "I want to do the work on the support plan," she said. The outreach to the 92. "I have experience with this, the nonprofit structure, the follow-through. I know how to make it actually land for people instead of just looking like it landed." She looked at him. "Let me do it properly." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at the road. "Okay," he said. "Not as a gift," she said, "as a role, with a clear scope and real accountability. I wouldn't have it any other way." She settled back in the seat. The city moved past them. The light was fading now, the streets going gold, and then amber, and then the deep, even blue of early evening. And somewhere in a building she could see from the window, a lamp came on in a kitchen that looked not unlike hers. And someone was at a table. And the ordinary business of being alive was continuing in every direction, as it always did, indifferent to grand revelations and gracious in spite of them. "This is a good city to have found someone in," she said. "I know," he said. "That's what I was counting on." She laughed, a short, real laugh, and leaned her head back and let the city go past. If you've ever had a moment where you turned back when you could have walked on, this is what that can become. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and if this story moved you, share it with someone who deserves to hear it today.